Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Blood tasted like copper and bad decisions. I didn't care that he was the heir to the Drax military legacy or that he could snap my neck with 2 fingers. I only cared that his perfect, aristocratic nose was currently bleeding because of my fist, and the sheer, adrenaline-fueled ecstasy of that impact was worth every bruise I was about to receive. The rain hammered down on the ferro-concrete rooftop of the Valhalla Academy, creating a curtain of gray noise that isolated us from the rest of the world. It was midnight, violating curfew, violating protocol, and violating the unwritten treaty between the elite alphas and the scholarship betas like me. But logic had abandoned me the moment I saw Cash and Drax cornering Alara in the library archives earlier that evening. Alara, sweet, soft-spoken Alara, who smelled like vanilla and innocence, was the one thing in this hellscape of an academy that felt pure. Seeing Cashin, the Ice Prince himself, looming over her with that predatory stillness had snapped something fragile in my chest. I spat a mouthful of bloody saliva onto the wet concrete. Get up, Drax. Or did the crown weigh you down? Cashin rose slowly from where my tackle had sent him sprawling. He didn't look angry. That was the thing about Cashin that drove me to madness. He looked bored. He wiped the blood from his lip with the back of a glove, his silver eyes, cold, metallic, terrifyingly intelligent, locking onto mine. He was a prime alpha, a genetic masterpiece designed for war. I was Kalen, a scrap-heap scholarship kid from the outer zones, unregistered as anything other than beta because my biology was as stubborn as my personality. Kalen, Cashin said, his voice low, vibrating through the rain. It wasn't a question. It was a warning. You are making a mistake. The mistake was thinking you could touch her. I snarled, settling into a striker's stance. My knuckles ached, split and raw. She's not one of your court toys, Drax. Touch her. Cashin tilted his head, a strand of wet, ink-black hair falling over his forehead. For a second, a flicker of genuine confusion disrupted his icy mask. Is that what you think this is about? I saw you. I shouted, launching myself forward again. I was faster than him. I had to be. I didn't have the brute strength of an alpha or the endurance. I fought like a street dog, dirt in the eyes, elbows to the throat, knees to the groin. I swung a hook at his jaw, but this time he was ready. Cashin caught my fist. He didn't just block it, he caught it. His grip was like a steel vise, halting my momentum instantly. The shock of the stop jarred my shoulder, sending a spike of pain down my arm. He twisted, pulling me off balance, and slammed me back first against the ventilation housing of the roof. The air left my lungs in a harsh wheeze. Cashin pinned my wrists above my head with one hand, his body pressing into mine to immobilize me. He was heavy, solid muscle and density, heat radiating off him despite the freezing rain. Listen to me, you idiot, Cashin growled, his face inches from mine. I wasn't courting Alara. I was asking her about you. The words hung in the air, nonsensical and jarring. What? I was asking for your schedule, Cashin hissed, his composure cracking, revealing a flash of frustration beneath. Because you are impossible to find. Because you avoid me. Because I have been trying to talk to you for 6 months, and you only look at me with hate in your eyes. Why would you? I started, but the sentence died in my throat. It hit me then. Not a punch, but something far worse. A wave of heat, molten and excruciating, erupted from the base of my spine. It wasn't the heat of exertion. It was a biological inferno. My vision blurred, white spots dancing across the rain-slicked night. My knees buckled, and if Cashin hadn't been pinning me, I would have slid to the floor. A sound tore from my throat, a whimpering, desperate noise that didn't belong to a soldier. It belonged to prey. Cashin froze. His grip on my wrists didn't loosen, but his body went rigid. Kalen. His voice changed. The annoyance vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp alertness. Let go. I gasped, the words slurring. My skin felt like it was being peeled off. Every nerve ending was screaming, agonizingly sensitive. The smell of the rain changed. It was no longer just water and ozone. It was a sensory overload of textures and scents. Get away. You're burning up, Cashin noted, his nose twitching. He leaned in closer. inhaling sharply near the junction of my neck and shoulder. Then, he stopped breathing. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. When Cashin pulled back to look at me, the silver in his eyes was gone. His pupils had blown wide, swallowing the iris until his eyes were two pools of endless, devouring black. Impossible, he whispered, his voice roughened, dropping an octave into a register that vibrated in my very bones. I'm a beta. I choked out, trying to shove him away, but my arms felt like water. I'm sick. It's just the flu. It was a lie. We both knew it. Ghost presentation was a medical myth, a genetic anomaly where a male presents years past puberty, usually triggered by extreme physical trauma or emotional stress. It was rare, dangerous, and violent. And I was presenting right now. The scent hit the air. It wasn't the soft, floral scent of the omegas in the inner court. It was sharp, spicy, and overwhelming. It smelled like wildfire, cedarwood, and distress. It was a distress signal so potent it could bring an alpha to their knees from a mile away. Cashin didn't kneel. He growled. It was a low, rumbling sound that emanated from his chest, a sound that bypassed my human brain and struck directly at the lizard brain stem. Asterisk predator. Mate. Danger. Safety. Asterisk Cashin, stop. I pleaded, terror finally piercing through the haze of heat. I could feel his control snapping. I could feel the thin veneer of civilization peeling away from the aristocrat, revealing the beast beneath. You smell. Cashin buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply, his teeth grazing the pulse point that was fluttering like a trapped bird. You smell like mine. No. I moaned, my head falling back against the metal vent. The sensation of his breath on my skin sent a jolt of pleasure so intense it was painful. My body was betraying me. It wanted to submit. It wanted to be claimed. I wanted to be claimed. The realization was horrifying. I thought I was crazy. Cashin murmured against my skin, his hands shifting from my wrist to my waist, gripping me tight enough to bruise. All year. Watching you. Fighting you. I couldn't understand why I was so obsessed with a beta who hated me. But my soul knew. My blood knew. He pulled back, his hands framing my face. His expression was terrifying, feral, hungry, and completely unhinged. You were hiding from me. I didn't know. I sobbed, the heat becoming unbearable. Cashin, please. It hurts. The fever. I know. He soothed, but the tone was possessive, dark. I can help. But if I start, Kalen, I won't stop. Not until everyone in this academy knows who you belong to. They'll expel us. I whispered, clutching at his uniform jacket. Fraternization. Between ranks. Let them try. Cashin snarled, looking over his shoulder at the door to the stairwell. He could hear them before I could. Footsteps. Security. Other alphas, drawn by the scent of a distressing omega. The feral glint in his eyes sharpened into lethal clarity. He wasn't just hungry anymore. He was territorial. Can you walk? He demanded. No. Cashin didn't hesitate. He swept me up into his arms, bridal style, as if I weighed nothing. I buried my face in his chest, seeking the coolest part of him, but he was burning too. He smelled of ice, steel, and blood. It was the most intoxicating thing I had ever smelled. Hold on, he commanded. He didn't take the stairs. He kicked open the maintenance hatch of the ventilation shaft. It was madness, but Cashin Drax moved with the grace of a jungle cat. We descended into the bowels of the academy, away from the prying eyes, away from the guards, into the old, abandoned subterranean levels where the heating exchange units hummed like sleeping giants. He kicked open the door to an old control room, the darkness swallowing us. He set me down on a dusty workbench, his body immediately caging me in. Cashin, I gasped, the friction of my clothes against my skin feeling like sandpaper. I feel like I'm dying. You're entering heat, he said, his voice ragged. He was fighting it, I realized. His hands were shaking. He was fighting the instinct to take me right there, violently, without preamble. He was the most powerful alpha in the quadrant, and he was using every ounce of his legendary discipline to not tear me apart. It's too fast, I cried out, arching my back as a cramp seized my abdomen. Make it stop. There is only one way to stabilize a ghost presentation, Kalen, Cashin said, his hands hovering over my shirt, hesitant. I have to scent you. I have to mark you. Biological resonance. Do it. I begged, my pride dissolving in the acid of the fever. Just do it. Cashin didn't need to be told twice. He ripped my shirt open, buttons scattering across the floor like hail. His hands were hot, rough, calloused from years of piloting Mecca. He ran his palms over my chest, my ribs, grounding me, claiming the skin. Why were you asking Alara about me? I managed to ask, my mind clinging to the last shred of conversation to keep from passing out. Cashin paused, his lips hovering over my sternum. He looked up, his eyes glowing in the gloom. Because you're stubborn. You're abrasive. You fight everyone. You have a chip on your shoulder the size of a battleship. And every time you walked into a room, the rest of the world went gray for me. He kissed the hollow of my throat, a deep, bruising suction that made me cry out. I didn't want Alara, he growled against my skin. I wanted to know if you were seeing anyone. I wanted to know if I had a chance before I lost my mind. Turns out, fate decided for us. He moved lower, his hands gripping my hips, pulling me to the edge of the bench. My legs wrapped around his waist instinctively, seeking friction, seeking him. This changes everything, Kalen, he warned, his thumbs pressing into my hip bones. Tomorrow, you won't be the scholarship kid anymore. You'll be the Drax consort. You will be mine. My rival. My partner. My mate. There is no going back. I looked at him, really looked at him. The arrogance was still there, but it was tempered by a desperate, raw devotion that terrified me. I had hated him for years. I had envied him. And now, my body was singing a song that only he could hear. I reached out, tangling my fingers in his wet hair, pulling his face down to mine. Shut up, Drax, I whispered, closing the distance. And claim your prize. Cashin let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl, and crashed his lips against mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was a declaration of war and a peace treaty all at once. He tasted of rain and blood, and as his teeth grazed the sensitive gland on my neck, preparing to place the mark that would bind us for life, I realized with a jolting clarity, I hadn't just beaten my rival. I had conquered him. And in doing so, I had let the wolf in the door. And that is how the feral prince claimed his unexpected throne. If the heat of that command voice sent shivers down your spine, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is a bond born of biology true love, or just instinct? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,